Hello, it is September 1st. I feel like I've gotten myself out of an on and off reading slump I was in all year until this point, so I'm ready to talk about and rank all of the books I've read so far this year. I think I have 14, 15, 13? I think it's 14 books to rank and review for you guys. So in the worst spot, we have We'll Always Have Summer by Jenny Han, which I've made 3 videos about this series. I've made my thoughts on the last 2 books pretty clear, but yeah, this is unfortunately probably the worst book I've read this year. It is just so jumbled and weird and crazy, but not in a fun way. It's the final book in the Summer I Turned Pretty series, and it takes place when Belly and Jeremiah are in college together. And yeah, it's just weird. They're a couple, but they are very unhappy. Conrad is still in the back of her mind, and it's just Belly trying to work through the feelings for the Fisher boys and figure out which one of them do I want to be with forever. And yeah, that's kind of the entirety of the book, is Belly's back and forth. I feel like the characters are acting out of character. I knew how it was going to end, and I just couldn't wait for it to end. If you're reading it and it feels like your teeth are being pulled, there's going to be a TV show adaptation. So maybe just wait for season 3 to drop if you can't bear the thought of reading it. I didn't find it that bad. It wasn't an unbearable read, but I just was not a fan of it, and I was excited to finish. Next, we have The Paris Connection by Lorraine Brown. This book basically just follows a girl who is on her way to her sister-in-law's wedding. So she and her boyfriend get separated on a train. She ends up in Paris. He ends up where they need to be. And of course, she's left without her phone. She's left without her credit card. She is just completely stranded. She meets a handsome stranger, and it just kind of chronicles her relationship she forms with this stranger in Paris, and then things she finds out about her boyfriend and herself and her relationship. Honestly, just not very memorable. Trying to remember anything that happened in this book past the jumping off point was a bit of a struggle. I was just kind of bored of it, and it was one of those books I was finishing just so I could say I finished it. Like, I'd gotten so far, I wasn't going to put it down. Just kind of an underwhelming read. I had high hopes for it. It sounded like a lot of fun. The cover is one of those cute cartoony romance covers. It seemed right up my street, but it just doesn't stand out as particularly good or bad. It just kind of exists and is what it is. I don't know, if you're into the romantic comedy, cheesy things, give it a go. I just read a lot of those type of books, and this one ranks towards the bottom just for being kind of nothing. On to Conversations on Love by Natasha Lunn. This is another book that I feel like is just cursed by being unmemorable to me. It's just a collection of essays and interviews and pieces of writings that she's made off of interviews she's conducted about love. And I don't know, I just found it not very compelling. When I think of memoirs that talk about love, whether it's self-love or whatever, Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton is top tier. I was expecting this to be almost as good, and it just was not. It did not hit the mark for me. And people love this book. I thought I was missing something when I saw on Goodreads that everyone was like loving it and raving about it. It just did not do it for me. I feel like it's just a lot of different people saying the same things, and I think books that are collections of essays can struggle with this if people are hitting the same mark too many times. It's just a lot of love is hard, love is work, you need to love yourself. It just kind of felt at points like it was a bit pandering, and I was reading the same thing over and over. A lot of people didn't have very unique voices. But yeah, I just found this one really boring, really difficult to finish. And if you're looking for a memoir about love and all the intricacies, I highly, highly, highly recommend you pick up Everything I Know About Love instead. Back to The Summer I Turned Pretty, we have It's Not Summer Without You by Jenny Han, and that's the second book. It's the book that the most recent season was based off of, and it was fine. It was perfectly fine. I would rank the books in the order they came out. I think the first one is the best. I adore the TV show. I just find that I am too old for the books. I should have read them when I was in high school. Being 24 now, I really feel a disconnect with the characters, which is fine. I don't expect books meant for teenagers to appeal to me that much. I just wish I had read these years ago. But yeah, it was fine. It happened. Again, I think I've just aged out of these books too much that they don't resonate with me the way they would have, say, 10 years ago or something. But I had a nice time, and that's that. Okay, Duke Actually by Jenny Holiday. Is that her real name? Because she writes Christmas romance. That'd be so much fun. But this book put me in such a massive reading slump. I track when I start and finish books, and I'm pretty sure I started this November 25th of last year and didn't finish it until January 17th of this year. It was just not hitting for me. I love a Christmas romance, but something about this just didn't speak to me, which is weird because I thought I would love it so much. It follows this very charming sort of playboy royalty figure. I think he's a duke based on the title, but that feels wrong. I think he's like an heir to the duke title, but follows him and a university professor, and she's very like studious, sticks to her guns, she's sworn off love, and of course they're gonna fall in love. It's a little friends to lovers. It's very sweet. I did like the characters. I just thought the pacing was weird, the structure was weird. Like I just don't understand the timeline. I mean, I understand it, I can follow it, but I don't understand why the author chose to write it the way she did, especially for a Christmas romance. Like when I'm reading a Christmas romance, I want a whirlwind romance that takes place in like 2 months. That is exactly what I'm looking for. This book, I feel like it's not even Christmas for most of it. Like it just bounces back and forth. Maybe I'm misremembering, but I do remember thinking this isn't as festive as I wanted it to be, so maybe that's why it took me so long to finish it. I like the characters and I had nothing against the writing style, so I would pick up other books by her 100%, but I don't know if I'd really recommend this one. I definitely wouldn't reread this one. Again, kind of just fine and unmemorable, and I think my hopes were really high for it, and I was disappointed, so that's a bit of a me issue there. Okay, Bunny is a book I expected to like a lot more than I did, and it's only here not because I disliked it, but because I liked so many other books on this list more that it just kind of fell here into the middle. It's about a girl named Samantha, just kind of this average girl. She's in a creative writing program at a prestigious university, and the only other girls in her program are these 4 girls that call themselves the Bunnies, and they refer to themselves and each other as Bunny instead of their names most of the time. And they're just very odd to her. They're very wealthy, they're very girly, and like, I don't even know how to describe them. They're truly like little dolls, little clones of each other, and they really rub her the wrong way. And eventually she's brought into their group and she realizes that everything is not what it seems, if I'm gonna say something without any spoilers. Simultaneously exactly what I was expecting and then not what I was expecting. I feel like it was slightly off from what I was expecting, but in the same level of chaos, if that makes... I feel like if you've read it, you'll understand exactly what I mean by that. It's just a weird one, but a good one. Had this book not been so hyped up to me, I think I possibly would have liked it more. I don't want to say it was a disappointment, but I really went into it thinking, oh, this is right up my alley. Everyone's raving about it. It's going to be my new favorite book. I liked it. It just wasn't particularly life-changing, and I feel like I was anticipating a new favorite book out of this, which is always a mistake. I need to just read books right away when I hear about them instead of letting the hype like marinate and enter my subconscious for years, because this is what happens. I thought the slightly unreliable narrator was really interesting, and I love to see an unreliable narrator. I don't read enough books featuring one, so this was a nice different thing for me. It was good. Not my new favorite book, but I definitely think if you want something a little twisted, a little academia, female-centric, definitely pick it up, especially fall, spooky season is coming. I genuinely did enjoy reading this book. I did not think I was ever going to read this book, but I found the audiobook on YouTube and the movie trailer looked awesome. So I was like, you know what? I might as well do it now. and that is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. It is the Hunger Games prequel, and it was awesome. It takes place 64 years before the first Hunger Games book. Basically, it's the 10th Hunger Games. President Snow is a teenager, and he's one of the best students at his school. So for the 10th Hunger Games, they have their best students kind of find a way to make the games more compelling, more exciting for viewers, because up until now, it's just been the same thing. The kids just kill each other. It's very unceremonious. So it's the first year with like interviews and mentors, and they really just want the capital and the districts to get to know the tributes and really root for them in the way that the Hunger Games exists as we know it by the time Katniss's Games comes around, which is such a fascinating way of looking at the Hunger Games, because you see the disconnect from how Katniss's Games are, how they become celebrities for 2 weeks, versus at the start of this, they are herded like cattle just to the games, thrown in there basically immediately. There's no training, there's no prepping, there's no trying to get people on their side, there's no sponsors. So it is just fascinating to see how the Hunger Games as they came to be was basically a school project for a bunch of teenagers. I wasn't expecting to like this as much as I did. I kind of thought I had aged out of the YA dystopian thing. I wasn't sure if it was going to hit the same for me, but it really just threw me back into this world. Suzanne Collins is just a phenomenal writer. It felt the same, but also fresh. Like I 100% felt like I was in the same universe with the same author, but it was just such a different take on the world. The characters were super compelling. I didn't really like any of them, but I was still invested in them. I ate this up. I would eat up anything else Suzanne Collins would want to throw at us. Give us a Finnick backstory, Annie's games, his games, just give me anything. Her writing, her ability to build a world is top notch. Okay, Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune. First things first, I had a lot of fun reading this as an Ontario girl. I read it at a cottage that was on or like adjacent to the lake the book takes place in. You know, she's talking about going to Weber's Burgers, and that's where we stopped on our way back from the cottage. And she's talking about Huntsville, and that's where we were. And then even the bit she has about Toronto make me so happy. Like, she's talking about bars I went to in university and Graffiti Alley. So I love Carly Fortune's books for the sole reason that it's just very Ontario, and I don't read a lot of books that feature Ontario so heavily and so specifically as a backdrop. So there's always that bit of bias there for me. But overall, she just understands the assignment. She says, I'm going to make a good cottagey lake beach summer read, and does it perfectly. It's a pretty nice, straightforward romance. It follows a girl who has to return home after her mother passes to her hometown to kind of run and sort out the legalities of the resort that her mother owned, and just kind of reconnecting with her ex is there, her best friend is there, and then to make matters worse or better, depending on how you look at it, she runs into a guy she had this whirlwind kind of day romance with 10 years prior, I believe. They had like a little day exploring downtown Toronto, and then they said, we're gonna meet up at the Lakeside Resort a year from now, and he never showed up, and she's moved on with her life, but he's also always been in the back of her mind. So when he shows up as kind of like a business partner figure to the business, she is just totally thrown off, and of course it is just a roller coaster from there. The characters are all really likable. I was rooting for them. The miscommunication wasn't used in a super annoying way. I hate when the miscommunication is the only thing keeping characters apart, and there's no good reason that they're not communicating. There's layers to their miscommunication in this, and it makes sense why they're withholding things and not being fully honest. They are basically strangers. They're not going to divulge every little detail. This is miscommunication done well. It's not an unnecessary plot device. Sometimes you need a little miscommunication, and she's not annoying about it. I know summer is over, but if you're soaking up the last of the warm weather, if you're going on vacation, this is a beautifully fun and short read that really complements like sitting on a dock or sitting on a beach. Okay, Daisy Jones and the Six. I feel like I don't have that much to say. I love this book. Everyone loves this book. My only real gripe is with the ending, and I think that might be a popular-ish opinion. It's kind of the How I Met Your Mother complex trope, if you know what I mean. Okay, brief spoiler warning, because I feel like that's not going to make any sense if you have not watched How I Met Your Mother and also read this book. So I'm just going to explain what I mean by that. When a man marries a woman and she has children for him, with him, and then she dies relatively young so he can be with the carefree woman who never wanted kids, like the true love, whatever. I hate that trope. Like, it makes my blood boil. It is bottom tier trope, the dead wife nonsense. So that is kind of my biggest problem with, especially in the TV show, because they're aged down so much. And it's like, he and Camilla did not have enough time together. They did not have enough time with their daughter. Nonsense. That being said, I do really love this book. I was unsure if I was gonna like the interview style. I was on the fence about reading the book or just listening to the audiobook, because I had heard that listening to it was a lot more exciting, and because you got all the different voices. I still might reread it by listening to the audiobook, but I found you got such a good grasp on the characters, and you got so much of their lives and their feelings. I felt so much more connected to the characters than I thought I would, and that's really important for me in a book, so I'm glad that wasn't lost in the formatting. It's just such a lovely snapshot of this relatively brief time in all these characters' lives, and it's such a whirlwind. So much goes on, but you kind of see that for a lot of them, this was not their whole life. So much happened to them before and after, that all these big life-altering things, being one of the most famous bands in the world, it was kind of just a blip for them in a way, which is super fascinating that everything was done and over with so quickly. Taylor Jenkins Reid, she just knows how to write a book. What can I say? Next, we have Romantic Comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld. This book slapped. I loved it. It was so good. It's basically about Sally. She's a writer on a show that is meant to kind of be not a parody of SNL, but it's supposed to be that universe's Saturday Night Live. And she meets one of the guest musicians, and he's super hot. He's super famous and charming, and she obviously develops like a tiny crush, but has that thought of, oh, he would never want to be with me. And then they kind of like, they're hitting it off a bit, and then she accidentally offends him the week he's doing the show, and that's sort of that. They never speak after that until the COVID pandemic comes around, and they start exchanging emails in the summer of 2020. From there, they really just rekindle their friendship, rekindle their spark, I guess is the best way to put it. And it goes from there, where they're trying to navigate, do we like each other? Would our relationship work? We had that spark years ago. Now we're just emailing. Where do we go from here? A lot of times I'm weary of media that references COVID. It feels very early. A lot of times it feels too soon, especially like medical dramas and stuff. I wouldn't even say it feels in poor taste, but it just feels like we've not stepped back enough to really look at it critically. It's kind of like how The Crown says they won't make a series about Harry and Meghan and stuff because it's not history. Not enough time has passed for you to really turn it into a plot, if that makes sense. It was a plot point in other ways besides just an excuse for them to start having this pen pal relationship, but it wasn't obnoxious. It made sense, you know, they were bored, they were in isolation, they were thinking about one another, and they got back into contact with each other. I just really liked all the nods to Saturday Night Live. I liked seeing the little process of them going through the week leading up to the live show, the writing sketches and stuff. The complete ripoff of Pete Davidson and Ariana Grande was very funny to me. And it's just, this book was very fun and light and nice to read. Even when it was serious and the stakes were high, I wasn't like exhausted reading it. It was just, the pacing was good, the flow of it was good. I would put this in the same genre of Emily Henry, where the romance doesn't take the back seat, but it is also a lot about the character growth and their own journeys and their own problems within themselves. Okay, the Daydreams is like Daisy Jones and the Six, but Y2K. And I mean that in the best possible way, because this book was super good. It just follows 4 young people. They were all teen actors in the early 2000s, and now they're in their early 30s. The most famous one of all kind of made a side comment in an interview referencing a reunion. And of course, because he's famous and the show was such a massive hit, it turns into an actual reunion because people saw how interested the public was. So of course it has to happen. The most famous one is the only guy. He is an Academy Award nominee. One of the girls, she is an influencer married to a super famous athlete. One of them, the one who they always reference being the reason the show crashed and burned, she is a recovering addict. She's kind of stayed out of the spotlight in terms of doing like meaningful movie and TV work. It's always just been scandals for her. And then the other one, the one whose perspective kind of guides most of the book, she is a lawyer in DC. She's happily with her long-term boyfriend, just out of the spotlight. And you follow her as she kind of pieces everything back together of why their friendships in the show fell apart. You get a bit of the other perspectives as well, but it's mostly hers. And I think that's for the best, that the least famous one is the one, because she has seen the rest of their lives through a completely different angle. Like, she's not in their world anymore, and she's watching her old friends the way the rest of the world sees them. She's no longer in contact with them, so she's also seeing them at this very surface level way where it's easy for her to judge them. I just found this book was super fun, super messy. It had me on the edge of my seat. If I was in a place where I could be listening to an audiobook, this was on. I blew through it. It was so good. If you like Daisy Jones and the Six, if you have nostalgia for the early 2000s, I cannot recommend this book enough. I just want to read all the books about this era, so if you have any recommendations for any that are similar, please let me know down below. In third place, we have Ghosts by Dolly Alderton. There's kind of a lot going on in this book. To put it simply, it's about a woman named Nina, and she's not particularly fussed about being single, but she's kind of casually dating around, swiping on the apps, and she meets a guy named Max who, perfect on paper, he's handsome, he has a good job, they have chemistry together, like she feels this deep cosmic connection with him. Their relationship is going well, and then one day, out of the blue, out of nowhere, things are going so well, he ghosts her, and she just kind of has to reevaluate her entire life. Not only does him leaving break her heart, but she no longer has a distraction to the other things going wrong in her life. Her father isn't doing well, her mother is in denial about it, her best friends are having children, and she feels very left out of their new life. When this man leaves her, she no longer has him to kind of soften up the rough edges on her life. So I thought this book was beautifully written. I love Dolly Alderton so much. It's the perfect amount of drama. It doesn't feel like it's doing too much or trying too hard. Just another Dolly Alderton hit. In second place is Emily Henry's Happy Place. I am the biggest Emily Henry fan. I love everything she does, and this is no exception. It follows Harriet and Wynne. They are a recently-ish broken up couple, and they're going on the annual beach house vacation with their college group of friends, and no one knows they've broken up, and they have to pretend that they're still in this romantic, loving, happy relationship just so that they don't ruin the week, essentially, because they don't want to, you know, rain on everyone's parade by not being together. So they have to keep up this facade and act like everything is okay, everything is normal, when everything is just even more confusing than it has been. I can't say enough good things about this book. I adore the way Emily Henry writes all of her characters. The lead characters are, of course, beautifully fleshed out, beautifully written, but the supporting characters feel like real people as well. They don't just feel like accessories to the leads. And as always, she balances romance and just personal growth really well. Both of these characters have full journeys as individuals, but also the romance isn't kicked to the curb. She just has a way of doing the most perfect balancing act with her stories, and I am forever obsessed with it. Okay, and last but not least, in our first place spot, and I don't know if anything I read for the rest of the year will be able to dethrone this, but it is Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. And wow, I don't know how to articulate everything I feel about this book. I read this in 2 sittings. It immediately shot to my list of favorite books. It is just phenomenal. I can't recommend it enough. It's so sad, but it is so beautifully written. Michelle Zauner is so emotionally intelligent, and you can feel it through the pages that she has worked through these feelings towards her parents and about her life so intently. Like, there's so much self-reflection that I felt kind of inspired to really look at my own life in a different way, because she could be looking at everything through rose-colored glasses, and she's not doing that, but she's also not speaking terribly about the people who have hurt her. I saw something on the internet a while ago saying, like, give grace to your parents, remember that this is their first time going through life as well. And oh my God, I'm gonna cry just saying that, but I feel like that little quote in this book are tied together very closely in my mind, because she doesn't sugarcoat anything. She's honest about times when her parents upset her, when she felt like disconnected from them, but she is so mature and, again, emotionally intelligent about how she looks back on her life. She has so much understanding of her life in hindsight, I guess is a good way to put it, and has just compiled it in the most beautiful series of essays I've ever read. So get some tissues if you plan on reading this. It was not a hard read, but there were a couple times where I had to pause and think, oh, okay, wow, that hurt a little bit, that stung a little bit. I kind of want to listen to the audiobook so I can hear it from her voice, hear it directly from her. Alrighty, that was my ranking, my wrap up of everything I read between January and September of this year. I don't know what's next. I'm almost done a Christina Lauren book right now, but fall is coming and then Christmas is coming, so I think it's going to be a Harry Potter reread, horror, spooky novel into cheesy Christmas romances type of moment for the rest of the year. I really like to read with the seasons. So if y'all have any recommendations for any horror books, your favorite Christmas romances, please leave them down below. I would love to hear them. And if you've read any of the books I spoke about, please let me know your thoughts. If you agree, if you disagree, I would love to talk to you about it in the comments. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye!